All right, well, we'll get started and just wanted to welcome everyone to today's webinar covering moves management. I'm hopeful that through your participation and learning in today's webinar that you will be able to implement a lot of the best practices that are covered in today's conversation. So thank you so much for joining, and do hope that the webinar is helpful to those of you that have joined. Just by way of introduction, it's very nice to meet you all. My name is Chris Looney. I am the founder of a company called the 5-Tool Fundraiser, which in addition to sharing several books, is an organization that really is designed to help elevate the role of the fundraiser by providing content, providing access to a lot of different resources and tools that will be helpful to all fundraisers as they continue to sort of advance in their own professional pursuits. And really the company 5-Tool Fundraiser is designed to provide webinars like this on a pretty consistent basis, and you can find and access the content at the 5-Tool Fundraiser website, which you see the address there, but also on the YouTube page, which has a lot of shorts and a lot of videos. And in fact, this presentation will be uploaded in a few days. And so take a look at the YouTube site for the 5-Tool Fundraiser and check out and subscribe and all of that good stuff. So here we go, covering the topic of moves management. And it's one of my favorite topics, that's for sure. Why is it something that I enjoy talking about so much? Because it is so fundamental and necessary to effective fundraising. Interestingly, the term moves management was actually coined first by David Dunlap, who was the head of fundraising at Cornell University. And ever since he coined that phrase, we've been using it really to describe the kind of relationship development process, the kind of step-by-step methodical approach to fundraising that many of us are very familiar with. You don't have to call it moves management. You can just call it good fundraising practice, but it is really all about the step-by-step methodical way that you engage prospective donors to bring them closer to the organization and give them the opportunity to invest in your mission, and importantly, to build a lasting relationship with them, which is really intended not only to get that gift, which is so important, but almost more importantly, it's to keep that relationship going so that there are many future gifts that are possible as well. So we have a lot of objectives that are really important through today's conversation. I'm going to try to land the plane within the hour, but there's so much content, so no guarantees. But let's try to get through the presentation. And sorry if I'm speaking very rapidly sometimes, but you know, there's a lot of content and I don't want to miss anything as we go through it. So just in terms of a broad overview of moves management, importantly, moves management is donor-centered. It really focuses on what the donor is attempting to get out of the relationship. It's strategic. Everything is meant to be really tracked and documented, and yet it's not meant to be rigid. It's really meant to be flexible to accommodate the very unique needs of fundraising, okay, and your organization and the relationship that you would have with the prospective donor. So in that way, it's not a cookie cutter. It's not just sort of get the gift and be done with it. It's not transactional, as you might hear people say. It's not a strategy for everyone. And it's definitely not just something that's stuck in people's heads. It is something that needs to be written out and documented. So the goals through moves management is to manage effectively a process by which you can take prospects through a cultivation cycle, moving them toward the desired gift level over a period of time and a forecasted period of time. So it's not this idea of perpetual cultivation. It's actually the idea that you move through steps so that you can arrive at a moment where you're not only asking for the gift, but then stewarding that gift and preparing them for the next gift on a particular timeline. And it's helpful, moves management is because it allows the development effort in office to coordinate the activities of the entire team and to build this pipeline that allows you to have some sense of predictability in terms of the outcomes that you might be able to achieve. And because of the system that we're talking about, we can expect, if there is an effective moves management program in place, to raise more money, to build stronger relationships with your prospects and donors, to be able to forecast, to be able to do something in a more systematic way, an effective and efficient way, so that there isn't a lot of waste of time, energy, effort, money, and all of those other things. There's an opportunity to collect and gather information and data that can be used for the benefit of future development officers and those working in development by virtue of the fact that there's a whole record of the activities that have been pursued. And it's really an opportunity to engage more stakeholders in the work, whether through staff volunteer efforts or just a greater portfolio of prospective donors working through these things. So moving on, we next tackle some of the key concepts that I want everyone to be aware of we're talking about when we're talking about moves management. So when I say these terms, you'll have an understanding of what it means, especially for those that are new to the concept of moves management or maybe have not been involved in an organization that uses it, or it might be the first time that you're coming into a frontline fundraising role. So when we talk about constituent relationship management, what we're really referring to is the identifying, qualifying, coding, and tracking of the prospective donor information to endeavor to form a personal lifelong relationship with those donors and prospects. When we talk about solicitation strategy, we are talking about the plan and approach that allows you to increase the success of your efforts by really targeting exactly how you're going to proceed forward in moving the relationship forward with prospective donors. When we're talking about pipeline management, we're talking about how the organization really uses the larger pool of prospective donors in order to advance those individuals through a process that takes them through the kind of cycle that we're going to talk about in a minute, because the cycle is critical to understanding moves management. But again, we're talking about progressive advancement of converting prospects into donors. And lastly, when we talk about strategic analysis and execution, what we're talking about is the process of evaluating your program, the goals that you've set and objectives, and tinkering as much as you possibly can in the right ways to achieve the optimal results. So these are four critically important key concepts that I would love for you to keep in mind as we move forward. Importantly, as I mentioned before, when we think about moves management, I want to make sure that you understand that it's a process. And as you see here, it's a cycle. And interestingly, there are 6 identified steps in the traditional moves management cycle or moves management process. And it begins with the concept of identifying who are your prospects. And at this point, really what you're talking about is identifying suspects. They might or might not be prospects, and you have to go through the process of qualification to really make sure that who you've identified are actually, in fact, qualified prospective donors, meaning that they have capacity and they also potentially have connection, interest, engagement, to make them someone that you should really pay attention to. So the first two processes here of identifying and qualifying prospective donors are critical because it's through these two processes that you will build a portfolio. You don't want to have a portfolio of people that are just names without any real important details about who they are, where they come from, what connections they have. That's really meant to be accomplished through the identification and qualification process. So let's just remember again, importantly, when you're identifying prospects, they are really suspects until you have qualified them. So one way, for example, that you might qualify those prospects that you've identified, those suspects you've identified, is through wealth screening. They might be, for example, donors. And you might be using moves management to work through this cycle with major gift prospects. Well, in order to um, qualify a prospect as a major gift prospect, you need to make sure that they have capacity. And so one of the qualifying uh, processes is to help to understand what their capacity is to make a major gift. So capacity and affinity are two very important qualifications here to understand before you move them into the actual portfolio. And wealth screening is one. Their history of giving to other organizations at a major gift level is another one, in terms of capacity, right? And then when you're talking about affinity, how long have they been donors? How much have they given? Are they board members or volunteers? Are they connected to people that or that are part of the organization? So once you've gone through that qualification process, then you go into those names go into the portfolio, and they begin the process that is cyclical, that it repeats itself after it's completed. And that's why you see the circle here and why the arrows keep going around and around, because you begin the cultivation process, which then proceeds to the solicitation process, the process to close the gift, which often means the documentation around that gift and receiving the funds. Then there's the stewardship piece, and then you repeat it all over again because you're eyeing that same donor for some future gift that requires them to undergo a new set of cultivation activities so you can prepare them for this different kind of gift that they might be asked to make in the future. So we're going to go through all of these steps in a lot more detail right now. So I don't want to get stuck on the moves management cycle, but if there's anything that is the most critical visual to really understand and carry forward with you as you move forward, it would be this graphic here to help you not only understand the process, but to start using the process and following it, especially if you don't have anything already in place. So fundamental to moves management are two concepts that I want to bring forward. One, which I should have actually covered a long time ago, is this. Moves management is really most effective when the audience is contemplating some very significant gift, not merely sort of an annual appeal type effort where you're asking them to make a more modest gift, but here we're talking about using moves management to encourage individual prospective donors, whether they're individuals, corporations, foundations, or other types of entities, to make a gift of significance. It could be unrestricted, but often it's more restricted in purpose. Often it's not their annual support, but it's something over and above that they're being asked to give to. So it's important because the higher the giving level, the more bespoke, the more personal the strategy needs to be in order to be effective with that effort. And the moves management strategy is kind of the way to be the most personal and the most engaging with your donors. And you can't be that way when the audience is too large. You have to manage appropriately your portfolio so that it's not so big that you don't have the capacity to be personal. So that's one concept. The other is that you have to make moves. You have to do things in order for the relationship to advance and for the prospective donor to be ready at some point to receive an ask. And you accomplish that movement by making very distinct moves. And there are two kinds of moves that we often talk about. There is the passive move, which is your sort of emails, your newsletters, those kinds of things. And then there's the intentional moves, which are more strategic actions that really help get you to the next stage in the cycle that we just covered on the last slide. And there is not uh, a uniform concept around how many passive moves and how many intentional moves and when you do what. It's really very bespoke to the individual. And often we would say that when we're talking about managing this process that every single person on your list has their own specific strategy, their own campaign that you're working on them through because everybody requires a little bit of a different management style, a little bit of a different management process to get them through the moves management process. But regardless, a blend of both passive and intentional moves are going to be critical for success, and there's value in both. There's also a distinction between sort of moves and touches. Now, I guess it would be fair to say that all touches are all moves are touches, but not all touches are moves. Because what we're really wanting to distinguish is that a move is something significant and strategic that kind of moves you through the process, where touches are those things that just keep you on the top of the mind of the donor and help facilitate the more intentional moves that you're going to make. So examples of moves would be tours, or when you have a briefing meeting prior to a big ask, and we'll talk about that a little bit. The actual ask itself is a huge move. The act of stewardship by acknowledging the donor is, or putting their donor recognition up, those are huge moves that advance the relationship forward. Whereas touches, like an email with updates or a birthday card or sending a press release, that doesn't advance you per se to the next step in the relationship, but it is very important and necessary because the more of these touches that you can have that aren't associated with an ask make the donor feel very good that the relationship is more than just about money, that it is actually a give and take, that you are involved in this relationship with them because you care deeply about them as an individual. And it's bigger and broader than just the money that they're providing to the institution for which you represent. So again, moves, touches, all important, all part of the process. Now, I talked to you before about that with that graphic about moving people through the cycle. And that is an extraordinary way to sort of set up your system internally so that you can be tracking the movements of all of your donors in a acceptable and methodical way. When it comes to other activities, like a very specific capital campaign, if you will, it becomes a little arduous sometimes because of the accelerated pace that's required in campaigns to use the standard moves management process and system. Sometimes when you're in campaigns, it's appropriate to accelerate everything and use a more compact and efficient moves management system where instead of the outlined 6 steps, you kind of break 6 or 7 steps, you break it into 4 steps. And it doesn't dismiss the need for the stewardship piece, but here, as you can see on the screen, we're really just trying to, if we've only got 12 months in a campaign or 18 months in a campaign, we have to get after it really fast and organize our activities to be very effective and efficient. So you might have a DCBA strategy that you see here, where D is discover, C is cultivate, B is brief, and A is ask, where you're going from D, then C, then B, then A, right? And it's easy to remember because it's basically the first 4 letters of the alphabet in reverse. And these are the essential tasks that are necessary to get you to the ask. So you might design a process, a moves management process, where you first try to assess their ability and affinity in order to understand whether they are a decent prospect and at what size, potentially, to build out that table of gifts for a campaign. So, for example, if we're trying to raise $10 million and we have a table of gifts that has a top gift of $2 million, and maybe you need 50 gifts and 150 prospects at various levels to get there, the discovery process is really your work that you would do to identify who needs to be, or what entities or what individuals need to be on that prospect list at what levels, 150 of them, so that you can be assured that you have enough prospects to make enough asks to generate the $10 million that you need. So assessing their ability and affinity is step one. And you land on your 150 prospects. You've got 3 of your prospects at $2 million, for example. If you need 10 gifts at 100,000, you've got 30 prospects at 100,000, and on and on and on. After you've built out your prospect list through the D process, then you move to cultivate, and you will work through some cultivation activities with all 150 of those prospects at some point in time. In most campaigns, you start by carving up certain prospective donors at certain sizes. So let's say in the first 4 months of your 12-month campaign, you're really focused on the cultivation of your $100,000 and above donors. And then for the next 4 months, you're focused on the cultivation of the 25,000 to 100,000 group. And then the last 4 months, it's everybody else. But I don't want to get too granular here. The important part is the next step is the cultivation process, where you're really trying to learn about what's important to your prospective donors and understand how they might fit into this campaign that you're running. And it's really a learning step, and we'll talk about this more. Then you move, once you've learned enough and you're prepared with a concept around how you might envision them supporting the organization, you would move to the brief, which would be your opportunity to kind of test with the prospect certain assumptions, answer certain questions that might fine-tune and ask, or preemptively kind of explore the possibility of a big gift with them before you move to the ask stage, which is actually asking for their support of ideally a very specific gift, that's something that's big and over and above that will be transformational in nature. So this kind of process that we're talking about now we'll cover in greater detail because they are such fundamental and essential steps. Okay, so with discovery, that first kind of accelerated moves management step, we're talking about ability. Ability would be the capacity to make a big gift. And there are all kinds of things that might influence that, not only their wealth, but whether they're liquid or whether they are putting multiple kids through college or have commitments to other institutions at the moment or going through a divorce. All of these things are necessary to evaluate. Then we have the access, which is sort of the connectivity that you would currently perceive to the organization. Do they have relationships with board members? Can you get to these people? Even if you thought they were great prospects, sometimes you're limited by an inability to make contact with them or reach them or get them to respond. So how good is the access that you have to them? And then the last part is the affinity, which is essentially their track record of giving either to you or giving to similar causes or giving within the same geographic region. And you know, certainly looking at their volunteerism with your organization and giving is tremendously important. And essentially, you know that you have a great prospective donor when you find that the affinity, ability, and access are all there and exist sufficiently so that you would want to move forward, you know, to proceed with them as a prospective donor or a real donor prospect. And you know, it's important to kind of share with you all that it's very possible to create affinity and very possible to get access to people, but it's not very possible to make them rich. So if they don't come to the table with that ability to make a large gift right off the bat, then you sort of eliminate them from consideration right away. You need to have people that are capable of making a gift. Now, you might also identify someone as capable, but if they also are known just not to be generous or have no desire to give any money to charity, you know, that would also eliminate them from consideration as well. You're not likely to be the first person to convince someone to be generous. You know, they're either generous or not generous, and the pathway to building someone into a generous person is maybe longer than you have certainly in a campaign setting. So be ready to eliminate people who either don't have the financial capabilities or who are perceived not to be generous, because You can't get around that, right? But as we always talk about, you can certainly make someone interested in your mission. You can certainly get access. You can certainly make someone engaged in the organization. You just can't make them wealthy, and it's so important to recognize that. Now, when you're in the process of discovery, when you're trying to figure out whether someone should be on your list or in your portfolio of prospective donors, it's so important to listen. Listening is such a key. And what I mean by listen is you sort of listen to them talk about themselves and how they might give, asking penetrating questions that would allow them to give you insight into how they're thinking about the organization, the mission, the project, all of those things. Or you might be listening for clues about how other people talk about them and what some of those very interesting elements are about them. Like, hey, if you're an organization that's involved in foster care, as an example, and you learn that there's a connection that they have to fostering children or something else, then that's the kind of puzzle pieces that when they fit together are just so critical and important. So you're always listening for clues. You're always taking down and recording information that one day might be helpful to you in formulating an ask or getting them to consider making a big gift. And you gotta ask them questions. You gotta ask your contacts questions. You might get a lot of closed doors when you do that, but you can't be afraid of asking people for their opinions and for their ideas and what they would do and what they know. That's what's really important to building out some sense of knowledge about a particular person. And in addition, you're going to have to do your own research. Okay, you're going to have to work with these people to really understand what their wealth capacity is, what their giving is to other organizations, where they sit on boards. You want to kind of build out a little bit of a portfolio of information about them. And oftentimes, to help you identify capacity and affinity, you might need to do some predictive modeling as well, which factors in all of the sort of critical elements of engagement that exist in your database to create a model that would help you understand if that particular prospective donor kind of fits into the model of what is perceived to be the type of person that generally makes a large gift to your organization. So a lot is involved in the discovery process, but again, it's all intended to help you identify the best pool of prospective donors to pursue with the greatest odds of success so that you're not wasting any precious amount of time. As we move on to the cultivation step, that's the C, the goal here is to continue to build a stronger connection to the organization and its mission, and to also learn more about them. So the idea is, what can you do during this process to give them more understanding of the organization, understanding of the project that's being pursued, to help them cement in their own minds why this organization is critical and necessary, why they should care. And oftentimes we see that this is the important time to be able to cast a vision around the organization or create a picture of what the future could be through the generosity of others, including the people that you're targeting. So it's really here that you spend maybe the greatest amount of time. When I think about the discovery phase, when I think about the briefing phase and the ask phase, those can be often very short. The cultivation phase can be very long. I mean, very long. I would probably limit it to some 12-month period or less. In terms of cultivation, the challenge, of course, is that it's very easy to over cultivate, cultivate, but never get to that next step of making the ask. And that's a real problem for a lot of organizations. They're in perpetual cultivation mode and never pull the trigger. It's like always dating, but never proposing. And it's irritating, to see that, when that means that there's just too many missed opportunities to create impact, and missed opportunities to provide the chance for donors to achieve certain goals of theirs from a philanthropic standing. I mean, you really owe it as a frontline fundraiser to your donors to be asking them to be presenting investment opportunities, because otherwise it's likely to go somewhere else and you'll miss the boat. You can't be afraid of that. No, you need to have those courageous conversations. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I don't want anyone out there to cultivate just enough to earn that right to make the ask. And so if we think about some of the strategies to consider in terms of good practices, best practices in the cultivation process, there are 4 here that I would ask you to reflect on and consider. One strategy is to invite them to some event, invite them to some meeting. Believe it or not, asking them to attend a gala at your table as a guest is an incredibly strong friend-raising strategy. I think sometimes, though, you want to invite them to activities where there isn't an ask being made at the event, so that you can maybe preserve the capacity to invite them to explore a gift as a follow-up. And sometimes if you have someone coming to a gala as an invited guest and they make a decent sized gift, you might feel like your timeline is set back from asking them for another big gift because they just made a gift that you didn't intend them to make at the event. So you have to weigh that strategy in mind, but there might be for certain arts organizations, there are just natural practice events and events like performances, that are so natural and such a great opportunity to invite them. Maybe you invite them to sit in on a board meeting or a committee meeting of some sort, but just getting them engaged. Tours are great, obviously. Then you might ask them to do something like volunteer, sit on a committee, share a testimonial, open a door to someone, host an event. There are all sorts of ways that you can get people to engage and do something. Getting them to serve is a super valuable opportunity. We definitely recognize that the more someone is in a leadership position within an organization, like a board position or committee position, the more inclined they are to give and be receptive to an ask. And then, the way to someone's heart is obviously by showering them with gifts, right? And your gifts don't have to be financial gifts. You can give them an award. You can give them an opportunity to share their skill set with a group, or to you can share with them different information and reports. So just a lot of ways that are easy to build that relationship, strengthen the relationship, and engage a prospective donor in the work that you're trying to undertake. Now, I find in the conversations that I have that the briefing step, the B, is the most misunderstood step of them all, and the most maybe uncomfortable or less known step. And there's a variety of reasons to create a briefing step. And the one that pops out to me right away is the desire to not ask the donor to consider something that would make the prospective donor uncomfortable. Like, so for example, if you intend to ask someone to make $1 million gift, you probably don't want to sit down at the table and without any sort of prior conversation about that level of gift, ask for that amount because you're likely to I mean, you could get the gift. There's no question about it. I mean, I don't want to eliminate that possibility, but you are more likely to offend the person by them being surprised or them wondering how you arrived at that amount or them not feeling like you earned the right to make the ask at that level. And that's just not a situation you want to be in. You want the donor surprisingly, right, to know exactly what it is they are going to be asked for in a meeting so that there are no real surprises, that the prospective donor isn't caught off guard or dumbfounded by the amount that you're asking them to consider. So how do you avoid that? Well, you have a meeting prior to the ask where you test some of the concepts, and the concepts that you might choose to test would be the concept of their interest in making a gift to a particular program or a particular campaign or a particular initiative. Hey, before we come to you with an ask, we wanted to verify or confirm or just check that this is the particular program or the type of activity that you would be most inclined to support. Additionally, you could also have in that meeting the intent to test an amount with them or a range of a gift level. So you might, with the prospective donor, say, hey, we're not ready to make the ask today. We'd love to be able to explore a gift with you in the near future. But it would be really helpful if you could help us understand if you might be open to the idea of supporting the XYZ program at the $1 million level. Would that be something that you might be willing to consider at some future point? And you haven't made the ask, but you've tested an amount and a program, and you've been able to then theoretically be able to get some feedback from them that would allow you to make a stronger proposal to shift either your focus or in terms of amount or program, or to fine tune it, or you might learn from them as a result of this meeting that, yeah, I mean, we might be open to that $1 million gift for that, but I think what would hold us back is the recognition around that capability, because what we really want is to name that building, and right now, what I understand is that building is a $2 million naming opportunity, and if we gave the $1 million opportunity, we wouldn't be able to name that gift. And then you might be able to take that feedback and determine a better strategy that might be a win-win for everybody. So the briefing meeting is really to ensure that there are no surprises on anybody's part, that you're all on the same page, so that when you do make the ask, the results are more predictable. Uh, the outcomes of the relationship are also likely more positive. So it's just such a critical step for many development professionals to take to protect the relationship, to show a certain level of respect to the person that you intend to ask, and often is a very strategic and important way to counteract any false understanding that you might have around capacity or interest or anything else. So do absolutely consider that briefing step, unless, of course, you're convinced that the prospective donor is ready, is prepared, and doesn't need anything more to receive that ask, at which time you can absolutely short circuit the B and go from C to A directly. And I would never, ever, ever counsel anyone to not move through the process more rapidly if the donor is giving you signals that it's time. And quite honestly, this B step often becomes an A step right away when they say, for example, to that same scenario where we're talking about $1 million for a particular program, when they say, "Oh man, like I'm glad we're talking about this. My spouse and I, we actually talked about this already, and we're prepared to make this gift right away." And then you're like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I'm so glad we, had this conversation." At which point you've made the ask. You essentially now are moving into the sort of closing stage or the documentation of that gift, where the follow-up, instead of making a proposal, is, well, why don't I draft up a gift agreement to make sure that we're able to address any sort of recognition goals that you might have, or the particulars of the gift can be explored and documented so that we're all on the same page, right? So, I think this briefing step can accelerate things quite dramatically. And of course, if you've helped a donor understand your intentions, that's great because there's transparency. And maybe you also learn that there's a different timeline that you should be looking at, or a different program, or a different ask amount, which again is so valuable to really being able to do fundraising really well. So when we get to the ask, uh, we generally want to know that we've earned the right to make an ask, meaning the relationship is such that the donor is going to receive us warmly. They're going to receive the ask with some level of seriousness. And how do you know that? Well, there's definitely a checklist that you can look at here that would give you confidence that you're in the right position to make the ask. So, for example, you would know who the best solicitor is, who's part of the team that needs to be a part of the ask. And oftentimes that would be connected to the person that is going to best influence the decision most positively. There's agreement on how much you should ask for. There's an understanding of how this fits into their previous giving history. There's an understanding that this connects to their interests and that they're supportive of the project, and the case for support. There's recognition that you understand how you should be recognizing their generosity appropriately. There's an understanding of who needs to be involved in the decision-making process. Is it both spouses? Is it one or the other? Is it the entire family? Is it their family office advisor? You need to figure those kinds of things out. And we say the 6 R's. It's sort of this concept of the right time, the right person, the right ask amount, the right recognition, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So just be asking yourself these kinds of questions and be prepared to know that you're confident the time is right. So once you get through the discovery, the cultivation, the brief, the ask, you can kind of close the gift, and then you need to move on to the acknowledgement, recognition, all part of the stewardship process. And it's an incredibly important process. You need to appreciate the donor. You need to follow through on all of the things that you promised that you would provide, whether it's appreciation reports, impact reports, whether it's the thank you letter from the president and CEO, from the board member, from the program officer, from the scholarship recipient, whatever it might be. But there's also these opportunities to send newsletters and updates, to send birthday cards, to send invitations to join special events and VIP activities, all of the things that you want to do to keep them engaged, to prepare them properly for the next ask that you're going to make. And it's totally okay to have selfish motivations for the stewardship process. Again, you have an obligation to treat the donors well and to satisfy their expectations, but you're going over the top with these other things in order to prepare them for the next ask. And it's critical that if you are trying to avoid a transactional nature of fundraising, that you're following through with the proper stewardship activities, because otherwise they will probably make one gift and never give again unless you continue to build that relationship with them. Okay, so on this slide, what we've done is taken sort of a snapshot of some of the key elements of all of the different stages involved in moves management. And I'm not going to go through all of these right now, but you might want to take a screenshot of this, or when you access the video, you can, on YouTube, you can press pause and you can take a screenshot, or you can follow up with me after the presentation, and I can happily send you this PowerPoint in PDF so you can have access to these slides. But just a great little cheat sheet of things that you want to consider. So you've learned a lot, obviously, in the last 50 minutes or so. And let's say it's time to implement that moves management system in your organization. What's important to consider is that not only are the stages important, but also the fact that what you're trying to accomplish are the incorporation of certain metrics, metrics that are measurable, quantifiable, that are necessary and essential benchmarks that measure your activity. And every organization is going to have a little bit of a different number against the meetings, the dollars raised, the percentage of asks that were closed, et cetera, all of these valuable metrics. But it's important that there is no proper moves management system unless there's metrics behind it, unless there's a sort of measurement of activities that are necessary against a certain timeline as well. So again, moves management is as much about the process as it is about the quantifiable measuring of steps and keeping track of that progress along the way. So that means that every step that you take, every single thing that you do needs to be recorded. It needs to be recorded in your database. And that movement needs to be reflected out in the meetings that you have with your frontline fundraisers and others, to be able to understand how much progress you're making and where everyone is in the sort of life stage of moves management against the full portfolio that you have of prospective donors. So you have to implement procedures that allow you to enter all of this information accurately, measure it all actively, report it out all properly. And there needs to be a comprehensive nature to all of this with uniformity and timeliness that's incredibly valuable. And there needs to be a commitment on everyone within the organization to follow through on the reporting of the moves, because if you have a handful of frontline fundraisers who are not following through on this and are approaching the work differently somehow, then everything definitely falls apart. It is very much sort of that the strength of a chain is to make sure that there are no weak links, and everybody has to be working together for this to be accurately measured and for the work to be effective. And one of the last slides that I have to offer for you, another good one that you might want to take a picture of or follow back through to grab through the PowerPoint or the video, is sort of some best practices when it comes to maintaining portfolios. So across these different areas of how to assign prospects, how to have the right size of portfolio, how to set proper goals. So for example, when you talk about portfolio size, there's a lot of different thoughts and theories behind how many prospects is too many prospects for one person to manage. But the reality is that sometimes the gifts are so large that you can't necessarily manage a huge portfolio. Sometimes people are working 50% as a frontline fundraising officer and 50% in a management capacity, so they might not have the same capacity in their everyday work that someone who is 100% major gift officer might have. But generally speaking, for a major gift officer who's 100% focused on frontline fundraising, you could expect a portfolio of somewhere between 75 and 150 prospects at a major gift level. And it might be twice that number if it's a mid-level donor, as an example, where there might not be the same level of requirements to move someone through the portfolio or the process to get the gift. So importantly, you can see that everything gets measured, everything gets tracked, and it's not just a philosophy, it's actually something that you need to put into practice and pursue rigorously. So this whole presentation was really meant to be an overview of moves management, to give you some of the best practices and ways to think about the process, the activities, and how you might incorporate some of these best practices in your fundraising work for maximum impact. Now, if you are serious about incorporating a moves management system, it might be necessary to take a deeper dive, which I'm happy to have a conversation with you or direct you to a professional who can help you think through the sort of best step-by-step approach to building out a moves management system in your organization. But I'm happy to be a resource to you in any way that you might find necessary as you move forward. And I'm just grateful that you gave me this time to walk through the moves management process with you. I hope it was helpful. I hope it helps create a more successful opportunity for you to pursue fundraising within your organization. And again, if there's anything that I can do to be helpful in any way, please do follow up with me using the information that you find here. You can find a wealth of tools at the 5-Tool Fundraiser website or on the 5-Tool Fundraiser YouTube site. But you can also just email me directly, and I would love very much to get in a dialogue with you. So thanks again, everyone, for joining today. And with that, I'll say goodbye. Thank you very much, all. Take care.